All slides are the property of the Marshall Project online news journal, which covers the U.S. criminal justice system, and 2016 Netflix documentary special by Ava DuVernay. Did you know that as of 2016, U.S. Department of Justice records showed that the United States incarcerates 25% of the world's prisoners, while we only make up 5% of the world's population? 6.5 million U.S. citizens and undocumented immigrants were locked up on parole or probation or under the supervision of a corrections entity. While crime rates in the U.S. were declining, incarceration rates were climbing. Mass incarceration is a huge problem for us in the U.S. That is us, and we are going to have to solve it. I created this video to persuade you to join with me in the dismantling and reassembling of the United States judicial system to help eradicate mass incarceration, to get on the inside of the judicial system as lawyers, to repeal unjust laws like stop and frisk, 3 strikes you're out, and mandatory sentencing for minor drug offenses. As correction specialists, to design programs which provide treatment and restore humanity to the vast number of people locked up because of an addiction or a mental illness. As criminal justice administrators, to reduce or modify the many rules of probation and parole that impede the inmate's likelihood of avoiding recidivism, returning to prison. You may think this has nothing to do with you. After all, you're not a criminal and will never be incarcerated. Well, the problem is not just incarceration in and of itself, or even crime. It is the fact that as a nation, we are suffering from hyper incarceration, wrongful incarceration, and incarceration just simply because we are economically and politically deeply invested in it. Through the low morale and inhumane treatment of a substantial portion of our own population, we are affected as a society to our core. Laura B. Eisen, in her 2018 book, Inside Private Prisons as an American Dilemma in the Age of Mass Incarceration, published by Columbia University Press, writes, responding to Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, 2 companies began to build and expand what is known today as the prison industry complex. In more recent years, one of the companies extended its reach to another area, the area of illegal immigrant detention centers. Currently, only these 2 same companies and their subsidiaries hold all prison contracts with our government. The names of the 2 companies are the GEO Group and CCA, Corrections Corporation of America, formerly known as Core Civic. Who are the people behind these 2 companies, and how come they have no competition after all these years? Could it be because they have grown 1,600% in less than 30 years? Deborah Timothy, in her 2020 essay, Imprisoned for Profit, said, private prison corporations did not boom and flourish without help from the government, nor do they continue to do so without continued cooperation from politicians, high-ranking government officials, and law enforcement. They also need the social, political, and judicial climate to be in their favor. Enforcement of certain laws are critical to ensuring that inmate prison beds are kept full. In their book, Prison Privatization and Inmate Labor in the Global Economy, Reframing the Debate Over Private Prisons, A.C. Amon Jr. and Carol Greenhouse say, competition in world markets for the huge profits inmate labor guarantees is the only real motive to keep large prisons in operation, when it has already been proven that smaller institutions are far more effective for crime reduction and rehabilitation of inmates. Many inmates work full-time for little or no pay to the advantage of private prisons, corporations. The Marshall Project U.S. Criminal Justice News Journal says 50% of all incarcerated people are already diagnosed mentally ill. Many are homeless. They go in and out of prison because there is no funding elsewhere to help them. Our government has allotted more money for locking people up than to provide adequate health care for us. We are the people the government are supposed to represent. What if one of us became homeless or mentally ill due to the current pandemic and the way it was mismanaged by government? Please think about it. It could be you or me. It is up to us. Ava DuVernay in her documentary 13, a Netflix special presentation, talks about the shameful corruption, racism, and brutality of the judicial and corrections facilities in New York and other major cities. She exposes footage of abuse by guards against inmates inside prisons and the conspiracy between government and corporate entities by an alliance of politicians and large corporations known as ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, whose only function is to create laws that would lead to increase of imprisonment. In her book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, Michelle Alexander says, out of what seemed like unlimited federal funding of law enforcement grew district attorneys' coercion of scores of addicted citizens to plead guilty to crimes they never committed or to very minor offenses and go straight to prison without trial with mandatory minimum sentences of 5 years. These plea deals still ensure that for every charge, there will be a conviction and a subsequent punishment, most often imprisonment. In closing, as students who care about the future of our democracy, we can change the face of the United States judicial system from the inside. When we allow one of our citizens' constitutional rights to be violated without recourse, we risk all of our rights being taken away. Our cities are not safe in the hands of the prison industry complex. If this problem is not resolved and the system is not changed very soon, it will continue to compromise our democracy, take away our freedoms, and eventually destroy our nation. Again, the main purpose of this video is to show you who are watching that we have a huge problem with the United States judicial system, and it is not going away until we all join together and do something about it. So what can we do? Let us get in the system and repeal unfair laws. Let us help break the vicious cycle that punishes convicts by permanently revoking their driver's license so that when they are released, they could have a better chance of keeping mandatory appointments, which if missed, lands them right back in prison. There is no limited or provisional license or transportation given by the state or cities to get them to and from these appointments. They are trapped by the system, hopelessly cycling in and out of prison, never getting an opportunity to live decent lives, let alone reach the American dream, because for them, it is a nightmare. Thank you for listening.